So what we're going to see is that the server already has its own certificate that's already been issued to the server. The server is going to send its certificate to the browser, but the attacker is going to intercept it and try and modify it. And we'll see what happens and see why the certificate provides the security necessary. So the server sends the certificate to the attacker. Well, it sends it to the browser, but the attacker intercepts. This is CS, so it was sent from server to browser, but the attacker was a man in the middle. They intercept that message and they obtain the certificate of the server. The aim of the attacker is to get the browser to think it has the public key of the server, but in fact it has the public key of the attacker. That's the aim. What can they do? Well, the attacker can try and modify the certificate. Let's go back to the slides and see the structure. Looking closer at the certificate, CS, this is what the attacker receives. The attacker can see the identity, it's not encrypted. They can see the public key of the server, the timestamp. So nothing is encrypted here for confidentiality. The attacker can see the contents, except it's signed using the private key of the authority. So let's try and modify something. In particular, we'll modify the public key and send a modified message, a modified certificate, onto the browser. We'll send a certificate, and I'll denote it as CS prime, because it is modified compared to the original CS, where we include the identity of the server, maybe the domain name, the public key of the attacker, the timestamp. We can use the same timestamp as in the original certificate because we know the value, we don't need to change it. And then what's next? This is what the attacker creates with the intention of sending the wrong public key to the browser. What do they do at the end of this certificate? You're the attacker. You want to intercept the traffic between someone and a bank and learn the secret key exchanged. What do you do to make the browser think it has the correct public key? What's your suggestion? Well, we want to do this electronically. We want to do an electronic attack, not a physical attack. Create a fake public key, all right, we've done that. That is, the public key of the server was sent in CS. The attacker intercepted the certificate, CS, and changed the public key of the inside that certificate to the fake one of the attacker. So I changed. We still have the identity of the server, www.bank.com, but we've changed the public key to that of the attacker. We use the same timestamp, and then we must attach the signature because the browser is expecting a signed certificate. How do we sign this? Well, let's include the original signature. This was the original certificate. The ID of the server, the public key of the server, the timestamp, and the signature. So let's attach that to the end without modifying it. That is, we don't change the signature. Have I got that right? The original hash of the ID, public key, timestamp, encrypted with a private key of CA, produces the signature. So this component that's the original signature. What the attacker does, they just change the public key inside the certificate without changing the signature. The signature is X bits long, they just copy those X bits without having to encrypt again and generate it. The browser receives this modified certificate. They don't know it's modified yet. What happens next? You're the browser, what are you going to do now? Decrypt for the purpose of verification. Decrypt what? Using what? Decrypt. You just received the certificate from you think the website you're trying to access. What do? Decrypt the signature using the public key of CA. You see this certificate is the public key of the website. You don't know it's modified yet. We're trying to check. We know it was signed by the CA. All right, how do we know that? Well, we trust this CA. In fact, if we look at the exact format of certificates used in web browsing, they actually include the CA's name in the field there, the ID of the CA. So we decrypt the original signature using the public key of the CA. So we go through the verification steps. We want to verify the received certificate. Decrypt using the public key of the CA. And I'll not write it all down, but I'll simply write the original signature. That is this part. What do we get? Well, we get the original contents. The hash of IDS, PUS, and T, the timestamp. When we decrypt this ciphertext, we get the original plain text. Because it was encrypted with the private key of the CA, it was decrypted with the public key of the CA, we get the original input. Step 2 in the verification, compare. Compare this, the value we just got from decryption, with, and I'll say a comparison operator, with the hash of the values we received in the certificate. What did we receive? IDS, PU attacker, and the timestamp. That is, decrypt the signature, get this hash value, compare that hash value with the hash of the first parts in the certificate, the content. Do the hash values match? No, why not? Why are they, do they match? Does the hash of IDS, PUS, T match the hash of IDS, PU attacker and T? Remember the properties of hash functions? If you hash 2 different inputs, you'll get 2 different outputs. So the inputs are different. One contains the public key of the server, the original public key. One contains the modified public key, the public key of the attacker. They are not the same. Therefore, the hash values are not the same. So when we compare, we find that they do not match. So no, they don't match. Verification failed. When the browser receives this certificate, it tries to verify it and finds that the verification fails, and now it presents the warning or the error to the user saying, don't trust this website. Your communications are not secure. We cannot verify it. Any questions on that simple attack or an attempt at the attack by our malicious user? Okay. So our attacker failed. Good for us. What if you want to try a different thing as an attacker? What else could you try? Anything else you can try? Why did this one fail? We changed the public key, that's our aim. We want to give a different public key to the browser. We need to change that, but we didn't change the signature, we just used the original signature. So we could try to change both the public key and the signature. Let's try. Let's go through the full attack. Again, we have the browser. You'll see it's very similar, the attacker. The server sends its original certificate to the browser, but it's intercepted by the attacker. The attacker makes a change. And for the modified certificate, again, we'll write a CS prime onto the browser. Same idea, it's still pretending to be the server, different public key, timestamp, we can set that to the same as before and attach the signature. Instead of using the original signature, let's create a new one. And the signature, we take the hash of the data, IDS, public key of the attacker, the modified public key, the timestamp, and to sign, we encrypt with what? You're the attacker. You're creating this modified certificate. You've changed the public key. You know you need to change the signature as well, otherwise it will be detected by the browser. So you recalculate the signature across the modified public key, and the signature is the hash value encrypted with a private key of who? Private key of the attacker. Or what should it be? Maybe you're right. What should it be? What would the browser expect it to be? The private key of the CA, right? When the certificate is issued, it was issued by a CA, a certificate authority, that is signed using the private key of the CA. The attacker doesn't have the private key of the CA, right? They are not the CA, they don't have the private key, so they need to use some other private key. Let's say that that's the private key of, I'll say, a fake CA. It can be the same for the attacker, but it's a different one from the original CA. It's one that the attacker made up, pretending to be a certificate authority. So they sign it, forward this modified certificate to the browser goes through the verification steps. They decrypt. They decrypt the signature using what, let's just keep track, this is the modified signature. That is, it's not the same as was in the original certificate. So the attacker forwards this certificate onto the browser tries to verify it by, same as the previous steps, decrypting the modified signature with what? What does the browser decrypt using? Public key of CA, right? We receive a certificate. It's signed by who? Well, there's the question here. Normally, the certificate contains the identity of the CA. I haven't written it in here, but it will also tell us who is the CA. So there's two options here. If we think it was issued by the original CA, we would decrypt with the public key of the original CA. And you would find if we decrypt this with the wrong public key, we'll get a hash value which would not match the hash of these values. Remember, when we decrypt with the wrong key, we get random output. We would not get the original plain text. So they will not match. Let's try that. Let's say we decrypted with the public key of CA. We thought this was issued by the original CA. What do we get as output? I'll denote it as some hash value, H. And now we compare that hash value with the hash of the data in the certificate. Does the hash of the ID, the public key of the attacker, and the timestamp match the decrypted signature? Yes or no? Hands up for yes, it matches. I see some, okay, good. And hands up for no, it doesn't match. Why does it not match? He is correct. And someone else was correct as well. So why does it not match?
Private key or the fake one doesn't match the key that used to open it.
Correct. The public key, the private key used to encrypt does not match the public key used to decrypt. That is, the signature, the modified signature, was created by encrypting using the private key of the fake CA. So when we decrypt this modified signature using the wrong public key, our assumptions about decryption, if we use the wrong key, and we are here, it was encrypted with the private key of the fake CA, we're decrypting it not with the public key of the fake CA, but the public key of the real CA. We're using the wrong key in the key pair. So when we decrypt this modified signature, we will not get the original input. When we decrypt with the wrong key, we don't get the plain text. So h, lowercase h here, will not be the hash of IDS, PU attacker and T, because we've decrypted with the wrong key. So since hash lowercase h will not match this hash value, the comparison doesn't work. They don't match. It's because we're using the wrong key. And because they don't match, we don't trust it. So no, the comparison fails, the verification fails. Because the wrong key was used here. Encrypt with the fake CA's private key, we try to decrypt with the real CA's public key. That produces an output which is different from the original input. Questions on that approach? We're using our assumptions about cryptography. Decrypt using the wrong key, you get random output, garbled, garbage output. It will not be the original plain text. But maybe there's something else could happen. Maybe we use the public key of the fake CA. All right, before we try that, any questions about that? How that attack failed? Those people who put their hand up for yes, it will match. You understand where you went wrong? Okay, now? Okay. So that didn't work because we, as the browser, we verify using the certificate or the public key of the certificate authority, but the attacker didn't have the private key of the certificate authority. So the verification failed. What if a slight variation of that case, same was sent, but we try to verify CS prime, we decrypt, signature, what if instead we did this at the browser? We receive CS prime, this certificate, which now start to verify. I've got the modified signature. This certificate was signed by this entity called fake CA. I don't know it's a fake CA. I know it was signed by someone called fake CA, I trust, or I don't know that they're not a valid one. So I therefore try to verify using the public key of the fake CA. What's going to happen if I do that? We've got the modified signature, which was obtained by encrypting the hash value with the private key of the fake CA. We decrypt that modified signature using the public key of the fake CA, the correct key in the key pair. Therefore, when we decrypt and compare, will they match or not? We now compare the decrypted value, lowercase h, with the hash of the original data. Do they match or not? Hands up for yes, match. Hands up for no, don't match. A few people had yes. Why do you think it matches? Because it's the right key, so The plain text was the hash of IDS, PU attacker and T, encrypted with the private key of the fake CA. Therefore, if we decrypt with the correct key, the public key of the fake CA, the output will be the original plain text, the hash of IDS, PU attacker T. That's lowercase h. Compare it to the hash of IDS, PU attacker T. They are the same. Therefore, they do match. Verification is successful. And the attack has been successful. The browser has received a certificate. It's got now the public key, what it thinks of is of the website, but it's actually the public key of the attacker, and the browser believes it. That's not the outcome we wanted. What went wrong here? What did we skip over? Or what would stop this attack being successful? What did the browser do that was maybe wrong or wouldn't do in practice? So here an attack worked, but we don't want that to work. The browser should not use the public key of the fake CA, or this assumes that the browser trusts the public key of the fake CA. All of these steps, all of these attacks and the verification, when the browser verifies the certificate it receives, it uses the public key of a CA. And we've said that we must trust that CA. So if we trust the CA, we assume that it will not do anything malicious. So we originally trusted the original CA, so we can use the public key of the CA. But if we receive a certificate signed by a CA that we don't trust, we will not verify it. It will immediately fail the verification. So this last attack would be successful if my browser trusted the fake CA. This only works if the browser trusts the fake CA. Fake CA. So that's an important thing about the verification of certificates. The browser must trust some CAs at the start. And by trusting them, we assume that they will not do anything malicious. In this case, the fake CA did something malicious. The fake CA signed the public key of a website, a server, using the wrong public key. It's like the ID of the website was www.facebook.com, and the fake CA signed the certificate, and they knew it wasn't actually Facebook that owned that certificate, that public key. So we must trust that CAs will not do that. They will only check and sign public keys which actually belong to that entity. In practice, this is maybe a limitation of certificates. Our browser must trust some CAs and make sure or assume that they will not do anything malicious, or they are not compromised in any way. If our browser trusts a malicious CA, like in this case, the attack can be successful. So which CAs should you trust and which not? How do you, when you installed your browser on your phone or on your laptop, did you check the CAs which you trust? You'll find by default there may be hundreds of CAs that your browser trusts. I'll bring up the ones that my browser trusts. If I look at the settings, I can view the certificates and the authorities. They are the CAs. And you will not see all of them, but you can see there are many CAs built into my browser. The built-in ones come installed. The software ones are added extra, usually automatically. These are all the CAs my browser trusts. And yours is probably about the same, not much different. Maybe hundreds of them there. And you know they are companies, some are government organisations. So if any one of these CAs is compromised, that is, they issue fake certificates, then the communications may be compromised. And that's how some attacks have occurred in practice. Someone has compromised one of the CAs and got them to issue certificates for the wrong website. The other way that such an attack can be successful from the verification of the certificate, if the fake CA's certificate is loaded into your browser, that is, you download a browser, you think you've got Firefox, but it's actually a modified version of Firefox, and included is the certificate of the fake CA. In that case, that fake CA can issue invalid certificates and then intercept your communications. And sometimes that's done deliberately. Say your employer sets up your browser on your office computer and they install their own certificate for their fake CA so they can intercept your communications. So there are some limitations of using certificates. So we've seen the normal process. We've seen a couple of cases where the attacker tried to modify the certificate. If they just change the public key, the verification will fail. If they try to also change the signature, that will fail unless they can get the browser to trust some fake CA, some malicious certificate authority. So some of the issues in practice with digital certificates, to finish off on this topic. How does a server get a certificate? Well, what you do is you go to a CA, some company or organisation, you say, I want a certificate for this domain name, www.mynewwebsite.com, and you provide some proof of identity to that organisation. Maybe you provide some company information, some identifying information, and something that shows that you own that domain name. And then that authority issues a certificate. And there are different types of proof or validation that the company does when they issue a certificate. Sometimes they just go through very simple steps. But sometimes they can go through an extended set of steps to truly prove or try to check who you are, and maybe issue a different type of certificate. And then there's domain and extended validation. There are some free services that will do this. Basically, you go to a website, you upload some information about your domain name and your ID, and they'll automatically issue a certificate. And many are commercial services. You pay, where it's tens of US dollars per year, or hundreds for, or even thousands for extended validation. How does your browser obtain the certificate of an authority? I just showed you the lists of maybe 100 or so installed in Firefox. They are preloaded. When the organisation that creates Firefox releases it, they try to check which CAs can be trusted, and they preload those certificates into the browser, so when you install the browser, they come with it. You can modify them. You can go in there and add and remove different certificates. What if certificate of a CA is not in the browser and you receive a certificate of the server signed by that CA, I think you've seen this case. If the verification fails, the browser presents some warning to the user saying, don't trust this website, or do you really want to proceed? And then you click no and you don't proceed. But unfortunately, many users will click yes, I really want to visit this website, but it's no longer secure communications. So some of the issues that arise in practice with digital certificates is that how does the CA verify the identity of the owner of the website? How much effort do they go in to check that you are the real owner? And that can be a weakness in the security of using certificates. The CAs have a private key, and we assume that private key is only known by the CA. If someone else learns the private key, they can sign fake certificates. So the security of the private key is very important, and different organisations will have policies of how to secure the private key. Make sure it's stored offline so no one can compromise their network and steal their private key. So use physical security as well as electronic security. There's issues that you basically trust the publisher of your browser. You trust that Mozilla or Microsoft, when they publish the browser, has checked and loaded certificates of valid authorities. So you rely on them, because most people don't change those preloaded certificates. I think you know what happens when your browser receives an invalid certificate. The response shown to the user has some impact on how secure the communications are. Many users nowadays will click, I don't care, I still want to proceed. But that is a problem because now their communications are insecure. Some browsers will make it very hard, or you have to click multiple times to go through to actually proceed. Of course, all the security algorithms used in the certificates should be strong. So in some of the older certificates, they used weaker hash algorithms such that attacks were possible, but most new certificates will use cryptographically strong algorithms. One thing we've seen some examples of, but we'll just return to before we finish this. We'll finish in the next 5 or 10 minutes. The format of certificates. When I've drawn them, I've simply listed the identity of the server, the public key, the timestamp, and the signature. But in practice, the certificates are more detailed than that. And they follow a common format, which is referred to the X509 standard. And it lists a number of things included inside a certificate. And when we access a secure website, let's see if we can access our Moodle website. Does Moodle use HTTPS? Let's see. It doesn't by default use HTTPS except for the login page. When you log in and submit your username and password, which is going to be sent across the network, HTTPS is used there. It's forced to be used. So eventually when our network catches up, we will see on the login page, the green padlock means that HTTPS is used here, and we can view the certificate and eventually see the details. This is a certificate, and it's hard for you to see. You maybe look at on your own computers, you'll see it easier. This is the certificate for SIT. And this is a special case called a wildcard certificate. It covers all domains under sit.tu.ac.th, including ICT, reg, For registration, www. So now registration website does have a valid certificate. So the format of the certificate, it contains a number of fields, some version of the format that we're using, a unique number or serial number, the algorithm used for the signature, SHA-256 and RSA, RSA for encryption, SHA for the hash algorithm, who issued the certificate, and a company called Komodo. And it actually has a subunit, this Komodo RSA Domain Validation Secure Server CA. That's the precise name of the certificate authority. The timestamp is actually 2 timestamps. This certificate is not valid before this date, 25th of March, and it's not valid after the 8th of July next year. So it's currently valid. The subject is who owns the public key in this certificate. That is the server identifier. When we said IDS, the ID of the server, for websites, that is a domain name. It's called the common name, CN. In this case, the domain name is anything.sittuacht. So the certificate is valid for multiple websites for SIT. The important point of a certificate is include a public key. So the public key is included, and in this case, the algorithm used for the public key is RSA. The actual public key is here. So this is PUS. And if you know about RSA, that's a modulus N and an exponent E. So that's the actual public key. There is some extra information, some extensions that are not necessary but common. Then at the end is the signature. So that last component where we take all the other fields, hash them with SHA-256 and encrypt with the private key of the authority, the end signature result is included here. That's the end part. So this was the subject of this certificate was SIT. It was issued by Komodo RSA Domain Validation Secure Server CA. And that authority also has a certificate where it is the subject, and it was issued by another CA called the Komodo RSA Certification Authority, which also has a certificate where it is a subject and it's issued by this AdTrust external CA root, and this AdTrust external CA root is the subject of a certificate and the issuer. So there's a hierarchy of certificates. The subject is AdTrust external CA root. The issuer is the same. What type of certificate is this one? If the subject and issuer are the same, then we call this a what type of certificate? Self-signed certificate. The subject is the same person or the same organisation as the one that issued the certificate. They signed it themselves. And there must be one of those in the hierarchy, at the top level of the hierarchy of certificates. So we end up with, in this case, one authority issued a certificate to another authority, which issued to a third authority, which then issued the certificate to SIT. So there's a hierarchy of different authorities for the purpose of that there are many organisations that can issue certificates and they go through different levels of validation. So there's not just one authority in the world. So that's an example of the X509 certificate format. So to summarise this topic on communication security and the internet or web browsing, perform web browsing, we're using HTTP over TCP, but everything we send is unencrypted. For secure web browsing, we insert this SSL protocol between HTTP and TCP. And that supports setting up a secure exchange or secure communications between browser and server. And the way for the browser to get the public key of the server and therefore exchange a secret and to trust that it's communicating with the correct server is using digital certificates, which we've just gone through. Does your browser send a certificate to the server? How does your browser, we're almost finished, how does your browser know that, how does the server know that you are the correct browser? Your browser knows you're communicating with the correct server using digital certificates. How does the server know who you are? Using logins. So we don't normally use certificates for the server to authenticate the browser. That's using the normal login type features of username and password. So there's different types of authentication there. So there are a number of issues with certificates, but they're still widely used. But there have been some practical attacks that people have used to compromise them.